Hey, changemakers! Thank you for tuning into the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. I'm your fervent feminist host, Raven O'Neill, and I get the honors of sitting down weekly with diverse experts from all walks of life to explore ideas, opportunities, and strategies that we can all use to hack our way to better lives within patriarchal societies. If you're ready to hack patriarchal systems and structures, I invite you to join us and help move the needle. Hi, everyone. So today is a little bit different again. I most recently released episode 52, and today is another one-off. You get just me today, which is highly unusual. I hate being a talking head, but today we're doing that because I am celebrating that I recently found out that this podcast, Hacking the Patriarchy podcast, is in the top 10% of podcasts globally. And for full transparency, that is not based on downloads. That is strictly based on a public RSS feed and how many episodes I've produced and how often I release new episodes. So ranked in the top 10% of podcasts based on that information. It's kind of like a Nielsen report, but for podcasts. And I wanted to hop on today and instead tell you about that journey and also answer some questions that I frequently get about my process and really how we landed here. So I want to start off at the beginning and really talk about why I started the podcast and then jump into some of the major lessons I learned. And then we'll go through all the different things. Don't know how long this is going to be. Hopefully it's in our standard 30 to 45 minutes, so I'm not way over like I have been lately, and it's also not super short and dull for you. So starting at the beginning, this podcast launched as a passion project. I was having conversations about how women could use certain hacks to better get yes from investors, potential investors. And I was having these conversations, and after I'd have the conversation, women would come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, that was so amazing. I wish I had a hack for this, and I wish I had a hack for that." And every time I would hear that, I put in the back of my mind, "Oh, that's interesting. That would be an interesting conversation." So one day I just launched it without a plan. I launched it on a whim. I knew nothing about podcasting. Like my episode with Maricela on Should I Just Quit My Job? That's her podcast. I said, in my head, how hard can it actually be? And those are my famous last words. How hard can it actually be? It is actually pretty hard. So I launched. I didn't have a plan in place. That was probably mistake number one. So if you go back and listen to episode 25 with my dear friend and guest, Jess Milanis, we talk about some of the things you should have in place when you launch a podcast. And really, the first thing is you should have a goal, know what kind of podcast you're doing, why you're doing it, and who your audience is. And I launched without any of that. I just jumped right in. So I quickly learned that it's a lot more work than you think it is, and it's going to take more time than you think it's going to, and it's just going to be a lot harder. There are so many things I think when you do a podcast you're going to learn along the way. So really maybe it's like having children and you're never really going to be prepared or fully prepared, but having some of that tightened up would probably have been a better use of my time. So one of the things Jess talks about that I think is super important is the naming of your podcast. It is, as she says, an SEO goldmine to have the right name. So be super direct, clear on what your topic is. Don't go with something fun like hacking the patriarchy. Choose something that talks directly to your audience and is super SEO friendly. I can't go back and change it. I won't go back and change it. So there was that mistake. I I also didn't really know my audience. I didn't have an idea of what kind of podcast I was going to produce. I thought, oh, I'm just going to create a podcast. There are podcasts that are lead magnets. There are ones that are private for private communities and private clients. There are all kinds of podcasts. So know who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, what your goal is, where you're going to place that podcast and for what reason, and then again, following the guidelines of SEO in your naming convention. Those were probably some of the biggest things I have learned along the way in regards to actual podcasting. Next, this show is not usually a talking head. Today it is. I hate nothing more than sitting in front of the camera and talking to you all with no one to have a conversation with. So this is not usually a talking head podcast. It is usually a guest format conversation with other people. I chose that because I enjoy having those conversations and I get to ask all the questions I want. And I approach that with a level of curiosity, and I think that that's why it's so much fun and why it is also super successful in regards to the style. Now, managing guests is a whole other monster in itself, so I highly recommend you have a very good CRM system in place for guest management. I book all my guests. I manage all my guests. My process there is that something I learned along the way, I cannot take credit for, and I honestly can't remember from. Maybe I will try and find that and put that in the show notes. But I was invited onto a podcast where this woman had a page on the internet that told you exactly her process. And actually, I think hers was also in Notion. So instead of recreating the wheel, I created my own Notion page where I send anyone who wants to be a guest, and it pretty much tells you everything about my process. It has all the links through the process so that you know exactly the steps I'm going to take to get you on the show, to produce the show, and to close out the show. So I learned that from someone else. I created that. When I first launched the show, I had to beg people to come on. So my first season, if you're from my first season and you're tuning in, thank you for giving me a shot, because now we are in the top 10%, but at the time I was not, and I had to beg people to come on the show. I don't have to do that anymore. So now I get a ton of inbound PR professionals, administrative assistants, executive assistants, anyone like that, that will pitch me daily on having the person they're trying to pitch on the show. Now I just truly direct them to that page. This is my process. Start here, go through the process. As soon as you have a discovery call scheduled, we're off to the races. It explains the rest of the process. So that was something I learned along the way, but it has helped me immensely in managing guests. So guests will either I'll have an introduction to a guest, or a guest will reach out, someone from PR will reach out. When they do, I give them that process. They fill out an intake form and sign up for a discovery call so that we can discuss what angles we're going to use for that. Then once they have done the discovery call and they actually book a time on my recording calendar, which I use TidyCal, and I have several calendars. I have all of my personal calendars linked so that I don't ever schedule a booking over anything else I have on my calendar. And it's all within TidyCal, along with a connection to my Google Calendar so that I don't overbook. And I have all of that set up so they book a discovery call, they do the intake form, then after the discovery call, they go back to that form that's on Notion that I already have set up. They use that, they schedule a time on the recording calendar. Once I get that time on the recording calendar, I then put them into my CRM that I built in Notion specific to the podcast process. That puts them in there. I get dinged 2 weeks before our recording. I think about our conversation. I usually go back to the recording of the discovery call, and I come up with about 10 questions I might ask. Honestly, I have never had a guest go through all the questions. Usually we get to about number 3 and then we're having a conversation and we don't even look back at the questions. But I send them those questions. They have the opportunity to come back and say, hey, I'd really like to talk about this. You missed this. I don't like to talk about that. I would like to not talk about it at all. Anything like that. And then once we have those questions pretty much figured out, then we hop on the recording. We record, and I will go over my tech stack in a moment, but we record. Then a couple weeks later, it starts the editing process. We'll go through the editing process. No one else is privy to that but myself. I edit the show. I create all of the marketing assets. I go through all of the rest of the process. And again, I have a Notion project management system I built that kind of makes sure I'm doing what I need to do along the way. And then I release it out into the world. So really, that's my guest management. I know that having a guest is one of most podcasters' biggest fears. So I have that down to a science now. It's really a learning curve. But if you are jumping in and that's the route you want to go, I highly recommend making that public-facing process page and you just send that to people that are interested. That also puts the onus back on them, so that if they truly want to join me, they're going to fill out that intake form, they're going to sign up for the discovery call, and they're going to follow the instructions on the sheet. Really great gatekeeping too, because a fair amount of people fall off at that point. That's really nice, because if they're not going to go through that process, then I'm not interested in having a conversation with them on the show. So that is really my guest process. Now, let's go ahead and look at my tech stack. So we're really going to dive into tech stack because of production. So I use a Yeti Blue microphone. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it has worked for me from the beginning, so I stick to it. I use a Sony professional camera. I use Riverside. I record and edit in Riverside and also in GarageBand and iMovie. I have professional lighting systems in this podcast recording studio, and that is really it. It is super simple. Again, I manage it in Notion. I record it in Riverside. I edit in Riverside. I do some editing in GarageBand, so I record everyone's intro separately. Oh, and I do work in Canva and then also iMovie. That's really it for the tech stack. Again, I have your standard microphone, a really nice camera, my laptop, and that's it. Super easy tech stack. I will say that editing is probably the longest part of the process besides creating marketing assets. And I'll go over marketing in a minute. But editing is probably the longest process. I would say, depending on the episode and how many things I'm trying to fix, I probably put about 4 hours in for a really easy episode, and anywhere like up to 10 for one that needs a lot of editing. And that is because I'm not an editor, and the AI does a great job of making things smooth, but you have to go through the episode word for word several times. And even then, things slip through the crack. And if you're using AI to do the captions, it will mess up your captions left and right. Some of that slips through the crack, but honestly, you have to. I watch the episode as I'm editing the video and audio, and then I go back and I add the captions and I watch it again, making sure that the captions are as correct as I can get it. And then through the process, I will end up watching it a couple more times. So yeah, editing is by far the longest process outside of creating assets for marketing. I will say use AI to its best availability. So something like Descript or Riverside is really, really, really great for editing. Moving into, let's rewind. I will say, I'm trying to give you some hacks as I go through each thing for production. I would say one of the biggest hacks is whatever you think it's going to take in time when you're first starting out, double it. I did start out this podcast as an audio only show for the first 2 seasons. When I first started out, it was probably taking me about 6 to 8 hours to edit a 30-minute audio podcast. I got really, really good at it, and it was only taking me maybe an hour and a half. And then in 2025, I decided to produce a video format with every episode, and I had to reinvent the wheel and really learn how to do video editing from scratch. And that upped it again from, I'd say, the hour and a half, 2 hour mark to, again, an episode that doesn't need a ton of editing, probably 4 hours, maybe. And then if it requires a ton of editing, it can get really high up there and probably about 8 to 10 hours. In full transparency, between managing guests, managing my systems and structures, my project management, along with recording, editing, putting it out into the world and all the different platforms, creating marketing assets, actually putting all the marketing assets out there. Everything said and done, I probably spend about 20 to 30 hours a week on this podcast, depending on what's going on with how much editing and whatnot. On a good week, I'd say probably 20. On a bad week, closer to 30 maybe. So that is that. So moving on to the actual marketing of the show. So I have all that marketing and that project management system that I have. I create a ton of assets for my guests. Just for the actual podcast alone, I have to create cover art, video cover art, Instagram resize of the cover art for the live. I do an intro carousel. I do 2 different videos, and for one of them, the text gets cut off, so I have to do it in a format for Instagram separate from a format from YouTube. So that technically ends up being 3 videos. I create a personal video. I create a personal post with a completely different asset. And then I create some carousels and some quotes. So overall, I think I just rambled all that off and I didn't even count. I should have been counting. I think I create 6 to 7 different pieces of material along with the text that goes with it for each episode and each guest. So that, on top of the editing, really adds up to the hours I spend here. And where am I going with this next? I was going to try and wrap this up with my final thoughts and my final hacks. And I will say, on the show, I ask every guest to end with 3 hacks, and I want to give you 3 of what I think are the most important hacks. And I already covered them in the episode, but I'm going to say them again just for fun and just so you really hear it before I let you go. The first one is really know what kind of podcast you're doing. And this is just one hack that has several things in it. Really know what kind of podcast you're doing. Know your end goal. And know your listeners. So really make sure that everything is buttoned up, SEO friendly. Really look at those things. Number 2 is take whatever time you think it's going to take and double it. At least in the beginning, say, I think it's only going to take me 15 hours. Double it and clock it for 30. That way you won't be shocked. The third is where I'm at in full transparency, and I would say figure out how to monetize it fast if it isn't your favorite thing to do, so that you can hand off some of that. I, again, do know several podcast producers, and I think the average that I heard was to slate 2,000 an episode for full production from beginning to end. So find a way to monetize it, get those sponsors, get the people involved that you need to so you can hand that off. That's where I'm at. That's what I'm hoping for. I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had it all figured out in that area so I wasn't doing all of the work myself, but we'll get there and start thinking of that as you launch it. And that's really it. I do want to have this episode be more conversational, so feel free to, wherever you're tuning in, throw out your questions. I'm going to try and answer as many as I can. If you're not on YouTube and you don't want to post the questions in the comments there, feel free to email me at Raven, RAVEN, at ravenoneal.com. That's RAVENONEAL.com. Or find me on LinkedIn. Drop me a DM. I love those too. I hope this was helpful. I hope that this show continues on for many, many years to come. I do have at least the episodes recorded and ready to go all the way through October. So now I just need to wrap up November and December, and then we'll be circling back to 2026. And I hope you'll continue the journey with me. If you have any questions, hit me up. It's been great talking to you today. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. For all the juicy deets on this episode, be sure to check out our show notes or give us a holler on Instagram at Hacking the Patriarchy Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support this podcast, don't be shy. Please share it with your friends. Sharing is caring after all. Lastly, if you'd like to lend your personal support, please take a moment to tell the world about it with a review on your favorite streaming platform. We'd be forever grateful. Tune in again soon to enjoy a brand new episode of the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. And until next time, keep on hacking, my friends.